Lena had always lived her life carefully, tucked away in her quiet little apartment building near the park, where the mornings were calm, and the evenings were filled with the soft hum of the city settling down. She liked her routines. The way the sunlight fell across her small balcony, the smell of freshly brewed coffee in the morning, the gentle rhythm of her steps as she walked to the nearby corner shop, and the solitude that comforted her even in loneliness, because after heartbreak and years of disappointment, she had grown used to walls built high enough to keep the world at a distance, and yet not so high that she couldn't notice the little things, like the way the leaves swayed in the wind or how the streetlight flickered on at the exact same time every evening, small patterns that gave her a sense of control in a life that often felt unpredictable. That afternoon, the rain had started suddenly, catching her off guard as she struggled with several bags of groceries, the weight of which pressed uncomfortably against her arms and made her steps falter on the narrow, slick stairs, and she muttered under her breath, wishing she had stayed home instead, when a voice called out, warm and calm, "Here, let me take that," and she looked up to see Ethan, her neighbor, someone she had noticed in passing but never spoken to, standing there with a gentle smile that made her heart skip in a way she hadn't expected, hazel eyes meeting hers with an ease that seemed to understand her exhaustion and her frustration without judgment. And suddenly the bags were lighter, his presence lighter still, and Lena felt a strange rush of gratitude mixed with a flicker of curiosity, a pull she couldn't quite name as he carried her groceries into the apartment, chatting casually, sharing small pleasantries that made her laugh despite herself, and as they entered the lobby together, the smell of wet cement and rain-soaked pavement mingling with the faint scent of flowers from the window boxes, Lena realized that she had been waiting for a moment like this, even if she didn't know it, a moment where someone noticed her without asking anything in return, a gesture so simple it felt revolutionary. And as they walked up the stairs side by side, she found herself glancing at him, noting the way the damp hair clung slightly to his forehead, the way his jacket hung loosely on his shoulders, and the easy way he moved that suggested confidence without arrogance. And when they reached her door, he handed back the bags with a small nod, his smile lingering, and she felt an odd ache in her chest, a mix of warmth and something more complex, something that suggested longing or maybe just the sudden thrill of connection. And when she thanked him, her voice sounded quieter, softer than usual, as if acknowledging the moment made it more real, and he smiled again, tipping his head slightly, the kind of smile that could stay with someone long after the moment had passed. And as he left, Lena closed her door and leaned against it, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't quite organize, realizing that this small, unexpected act of kindness had touched something deep inside her, something she had kept dormant for years, and she found herself replaying the scene in her mind over and over, remembering the warmth of his hands, the gentle tone of his voice, the effortless way he had entered her space without breaking it, and she felt a subtle hope, delicate and fragile, like the first light of dawn breaking through a dark night, and she wondered why such a simple gesture could have such an effect, why one person's presence could make her world feel suddenly wider, less lonely, and perhaps a little more magical. And as the rain continued to patter against the windows, Lena sat down at her kitchen table, sipping her coffee that had gone slightly cold, thinking about the fleeting moments that had defined her life until now, the times she had felt unnoticed, the nights she had spent staring at the ceiling wondering if connection would ever come her way again. And now, with this unexpected kindness, she felt a fluttering in her chest that she couldn't ignore, a sensation that something significant had begun, something that might grow into a story she hadn't dared to imagine. And she realized that life had a way of surprising people when they least expected it, that even the smallest gestures, a helping hand, a simple smile, a few words said at the right time, could ripple through someone's world and change it quietly but profoundly. And Lena thought about how easily she could have ignored the moment, could have shuffled past him without meeting his gaze, could have carried her groceries herself and returned to her solitary routine, but fate, or perhaps something gentler, something intentional, had intervened, and she felt the faintest thrill of anticipation, a delicate tension in her chest as she considered the possibilities that lay ahead, possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to imagine for years. And for the first time in a long while, Lena let herself hope, let herself imagine that maybe, just maybe, the ordinary rhythm of her life could be interrupted by extraordinary kindness, by connection, by someone who truly saw her. And she felt a quiet smile tug at her lips, A smile that reflected the warmth spreading through her, a feeling that perhaps her heart, long dormant and guarded, was beginning to stir, awakening to the realization that life could hold unexpected gifts, that people could arrive in one's life in ways that were subtle yet transformative. And as she stood by the window, watching the rain drip down in silvery streams, Lena felt a gentle excitement, a tender curiosity about what tomorrow might bring, knowing that the world outside her small apartment had suddenly become a little more alive, a little more promising, and all because of one simple gesture, one moment of attention and care that had shifted the trajectory of her quiet, predictable life in ways she could not yet fully understand. And in that moment, she resolved to notice the small acts of kindness around her, to cherish the subtle connections, and to let her heart remain open, even if only cautiously, because she had felt, in the briefest of encounters, the power of human warmth. And it was a feeling she would carry with her long after the rain stopped, long after the groceries were unpacked, long after the door clicked shut, a feeling that whispered of possibilities, of stories yet to unfold, of emotions she had kept tucked away, and she knew, deep inside, that her life had begun a quiet, beautiful change, one that started not with grand gestures or sweeping moments, but with a simple hand reaching out, a simple smile, and a simple "let me help you." And Lena couldn't help but wonder what other small gestures, what other moments of attention and care, might come her way, slowly weaving a tapestry of connection, romance, and the quiet thrill of hearts recognizing one another in the most unexpected ways. After that rainy afternoon, Lena found herself noticing Ethan in ways she hadn't before, the small moments lingering in her mind like fragments of a delicate dream, the way he walked past her door with a gentle wave, the way his smile seemed to brighten the dullest corners of her days, and soon those fleeting glimpses became a thread connecting her thoughts, a quiet anticipation that hummed under the surface of her routine life, making even the most ordinary mornings feel lighter, more alive. It started with small exchanges, simple greetings that held more meaning than she could name, a good morning that lingered in her chest longer than it should, a brief chat by the mailbox that left her smiling for hours afterward, and then came the little notes, tiny pieces of kindness left on her door, scribbled with cheerful words or tiny doodles of suns and flowers, gestures so thoughtful that Lena found herself carefully saving each one, pressing them between the pages of her notebook, reading them over and over, each word warming her in ways she hadn't realized she had missed, and she began to look forward to these moments, wondering what he might write next, wondering what small act of care he might show tomorrow. And as the days turned into weeks, a pattern emerged, a rhythm that neither of them had planned but that felt effortless, natural, and full of subtle intimacy. One evening, as the sky burned gold and pink with the setting sun, Lena saw Ethan sitting alone on the park bench with a book in his hands, the breeze gently tousling his hair, the pages fluttering slightly as he read, and something in the way he seemed completely absorbed in his own world yet entirely present at the same time drew her closer, urging her to speak, to cross the invisible line that had held them in polite acquaintance until now. And with a tentative step, she approached, heart racing, unsure if he would welcome her, unsure if this moment might shatter the fragile connection she had grown to cherish. But as soon as he looked up and smiled, that same warm, easy smile from the rainy afternoon, Lena felt a wave of comfort, a sense of rightness, as if this encounter had been waiting for her all along, and they began to talk, first about trivial things, the weather, favorite cafes, the books they loved. But soon the conversation deepened, touching on dreams, regrets, hopes long hidden, fears that had been whispered only to the walls of their own solitude, and with each word, Lena felt the invisible walls around her heart shift, loosen, as if the trust she had withheld for so long was slowly being earned, and Ethan's voice, gentle yet confident, seemed to reach the corners of her mind she had thought were unreachable, unlocking laughter she hadn't realized she still carried. Laughter that startled her with its own brightness, a sound that made him smile in return, and that smile, so sincere and unguarded, seemed to make the golden light of the sunset pale in comparison. As they talked, Lena noticed the little things, the way he listened, truly listened, without interrupting, without judgment, the way his eyes followed her expressions, the way he tilted his head when she spoke, the way his hands moved in small gestures that made the conversation feel alive, intimate, yet completely safe, and she realized that she had been craving this type of connection for so long, a connection that was quiet but profound, subtle but transformative, a friendship blooming with undercurrents she wasn't ready to name but couldn't ignore. They walked along the winding path of the park, the scent of wet grass mingling with the faint aroma of evening flowers, and Lena felt a strange sense of liberation, a feeling that her heart had room to stretch again, to hope again, to imagine the possibility of joy that didn't arrive with strings attached or silent judgment. And yet there was a tension she couldn't shake, a fragile fear that these moments might be fleeting, that something as delicate as this connection could vanish if she dared to hope too much, a fear she buried deep behind smiles and laughter, hoping that Ethan didn't notice, though somehow she felt he might, for there was a gentleness in his gaze that seemed to see beyond the walls she had built, beyond the careful routines and quiet solitude, right into the part of her that yearned for warmth, attention, and something more than ordinary companionship. As the evening stretched on, the streetlights flickered on, casting a soft glow over the path, and Lena and Ethan fell into comfortable silence, walking side by side, sharing the quiet of the night without needing words, the unspoken presence of one another more comforting than any conversation. And Lena found herself stealing glances at him, noticing the curve of his jaw, the way his hands rested casually at his sides, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, and she felt an unfamiliar thrill, a gentle stirring of emotion that was part admiration, part curiosity, part longing, and she wondered what it meant, whether it was friendship, attraction, or something that might grow into something neither of them had yet named, but either way, it felt alive, important, undeniable. As they reached a small fountain at the center of the park, its water sparkling in the glow of the lamps, Lena stopped, caught in the magic of the moment, feeling the cool mist on her skin, the rhythm of her heartbeat syncing with the distant hum of the city, and Ethan turned to her, his expression unreadable for a heartbeat, then softening into that same reassuring smile, and Lena felt a warmth she hadn't known in years, a sense of being truly seen, truly understood, truly valued for her thoughts, her laughter, her presence, and it terrified her a little, too, because feelings this strong had the power to hurt if mishandled. Yet she couldn't help the way her chest tightened in anticipation, the way her thoughts danced around him even in silence, the way every small gesture, every casual word, seemed to carry weight she hadn't anticipated. They lingered by the fountain, talking until the stars began to scatter across the night sky, sharing secrets, wishes, confessions too soft to be called declarations, and with each word, Lena felt layers of her past unravel, heartbreaks, regrets, and fears melting into the comfort of someone who didn't demand perfection, someone who simply noticed, simply cared, simply existed alongside her without rushing or questioning. And she realized that the connection they were building wasn't just companionship, it was a quiet intimacy, a slow-blooming understanding that could turn moments into memories, gestures into meaning, and ordinary evenings into experiences she would remember long after the streets emptied and the city slept. Yet even as the night drew on, Lena felt a flutter of uncertainty, a tension between desire and caution, longing and fear, knowing that what they were sharing was delicate, precious, and could be easily broken by misstep or misunderstanding, and that very fragility made each laugh, each touch of the hand, each glance exchanged across the dim light of the fountain, all the more poignant, all the more memorable, all the more alive. As they finally walked back toward the apartment building, side by side, Lena's heart hummed with a mixture of hope and anxiety, excitement and trepidation. And she realized that in those short weeks, Ethan had become more than a neighbor, more than a casual acquaintance. He had become a presence in her life that shifted the ordinary into extraordinary, turning mundane days into stories worth remembering. And as she reached her door and hesitated to say goodnight, she caught his gaze one last time, and in it, she saw a reflection of her own feelings, a subtle acknowledgement that this connection was mutual, fragile, and beautiful, a beginning that neither of them fully understood yet but that promised moments of joy, tenderness, and perhaps romance. And as Lena closed her door behind her, the notes of their conversations and shared silences echoed in her mind, filling the apartment with warmth, a gentle pulse of anticipation for what tomorrow might bring, what small gestures might await, what soft smiles might greet her in the hallway. And she knew, without a shadow of doubt, that the ordinary rhythms of her life had begun to change in ways she had never imagined, all because of a neighbor who had offered simple kindness and had, unknowingly, opened a door to her heart she had long kept closed, leaving her wondering, dreaming, and quietly longing for the next unexpected moment they would share. The night everything shifted began quietly, almost gently, with Lena stepping out of her apartment just as the sky darkened and the air grew heavy with the promise of rain. Her heart already restless from a day filled with half-formed thoughts of Ethan, thoughts she tried to ignore but couldn't, because by now his presence had woven itself into her daily rhythm, and when she saw him waiting near the entrance, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed yet slightly tense as if he too had been carrying something unspoken all day, she felt a rush of awareness that made the world sharpen around her, every sound clearer, every movement brighter, and they exchanged a simple greeting that felt loaded with meaning, their voices calm while their eyes revealed the emotions they were trying to keep steady. And as they began to walk toward the cafe at the corner, the wind picked up, tugging at Lena's hair and stirring something inside her chest, a sense that tonight was different, that something important was waiting just ahead. They talked as they walked, but the words were lighter than usual, scattered and careful, as if both of them were circling around a truth neither knew how to approach directly. And when the first drops of rain fell, sudden and sharp, they laughed in surprise, breaking into a run toward the cafe's awning, their shoulders brushing, their laughter breathless and real. And as they reached shelter, rain pouring hard now, the city blurring into reflections and sound, Lena realized how close they were standing, close enough to feel the warmth of him, close enough to sense the shift in the air between them, and for a moment neither spoke, the silence thick but not uncomfortable, filled instead with anticipation and a fragile tension that seemed to pull them closer even as it warned them to be careful. The rain drummed against the pavement, the cafe lights glowed warmly behind them, and Ethan finally spoke, his voice low and steady, saying he had been thinking about her more than he expected, about the way she listened, the way she laughed, the way time seemed to slow when they were together, and Lena felt her breath catch, her pulse quicken, because those words echoed her own thoughts too closely to be coincidence, and she realized there was no turning back from this moment, no safe way to pretend that what they shared was only friendly or casual anymore. She looked at him, really looked, seeing not just the neighbor who had helped her with groceries, but a man who carried quiet depth, patience, and a kindness that felt rare and intentional. And before fear could stop her, she admitted that she felt the same, that his presence had brought color back into days she once thought would always feel flat, that she had tried to protect herself by keeping things simple, but that somewhere along the way, simplicity had turned into something more meaningful, something she could no longer ignore. The words hung between them, fragile and exposed, and for a second Lena worried she had said too much, revealed too much, but then Ethan's expression softened, relief washing over his face, and he stepped slightly closer, not touching her but close enough to make his intention clear, and he said that he didn't want to rush anything, that he respected the space between them, but that he needed her to know how important these moments were to him, how much they mattered, and in that honesty, Lena felt both comforted and shaken, because it wasn't dramatic or overwhelming, it was quiet and sincere, and that somehow made it more powerful. The rain continued to fall, louder now, and the world beyond the awning seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them suspended in this shared confession, this acknowledgement of feelings that had grown without permission but with care. And Lena felt a warmth spread through her, mixed with a familiar ache, the memory of past heartbreaks whispering warnings she couldn't fully silence, reminding her how much trust could cost, how deeply hope could wound if misplaced, and she hesitated, her silence stretching just long enough for doubt to flicker across Ethan's face, but she reached out then, lightly touching his arm, grounding herself in the present, and she told him that she was afraid, not of him, but of how much she felt, of how quickly something simple had become something that mattered, and instead of pulling away, he nodded, understanding clear in his eyes, and said that fear didn't have to mean stop, that sometimes it just meant slow, and those words settled into Lena like a promise, easing the tightness in her chest. They stood there longer than they realized, talking quietly, sharing pieces of themselves that had been hidden behind polite smiles and careful routines, speaking of past disappointments without dwelling on them, of hopes that felt fragile but real, of the desire to build something steady rather than dramatic, something honest rather than rushed. And as the rain began to soften, their conversation slowed, turning thoughtful, reflective, and Lena realized that what made this moment unforgettable wasn't just the confession itself, but the way it unfolded, gently, respectfully, without pressure or expectation, allowing space for both excitement and caution to exist side by side. Eventually, a loud car horn cut through the air, jolting them back into the world, and they laughed softly at the interruption, stepping apart slightly, the spell not broken but shifted, and Ethan suggested they walk back before the rain started again, and as they moved through the wet streets, the reflections of streetlights shimmering underfoot, Lena felt different, lighter yet more aware, as if something inside her had been acknowledged and given room to breathe, and she noticed the small changes in their walk, the way their hands swung closer together, the way their steps matched without effort, the way silence felt comfortable rather than empty. When they reached her building, they paused near the entrance, neither eager to end the night, and Ethan looked at her with that same gentle expression, saying that no matter what came next, he was grateful for her honesty, for the trust she had shown, and Lena felt a swell of emotion that surprised her, because gratitude felt like too small a word for what she felt in return, a blend of hope, vulnerability, and cautious joy that made her chest ache in the best way. She told him she was glad too, that whatever this was, it felt real, and that was enough for tonight, and he smiled, a quiet, meaningful smile that lingered as he wished her good night and turned to leave, and Lena watched him go, her heart racing, her thoughts alive with possibility and uncertainty intertwined, knowing that something had shifted between them in a way that could not be undone. Inside her apartment, the silence felt different than before, no longer empty but charged with memory and anticipation, and as she stood by the window, watching the rain fade into mist, Lena replayed the evening in her mind, the confessions, the pauses, the understanding, realizing that this was the kind of moment that changed people not through grand declarations but through quiet truth, and she understood that whatever came next, whether joy or challenge, connection or heartbreak, she would remember this night as the moment she allowed herself to step forward instead of retreat, to speak instead of hide, to feel instead of guard, and with that realization came a calm resolve, a sense that even if the path ahead was uncertain, it was one she was willing to walk, because for the first time in a long while, she felt seen, valued, and gently chosen, and that feeling stayed with her as she turned off the lights, lay down, and closed her eyes, knowing that the simple gesture that had started it all had now grown into something undeniable, something that stood quietly at the edge of her life, waiting to unfold. The morning after that unforgettable evening, Lena woke to a soft knock at her door, and when she opened it, she found a small bouquet of wildflowers, slightly damp from the early dew, tied with a simple ribbon, with a note in Ethan's neat handwriting that read, "For the moments that make life unforgettable, would you walk with me this evening?" And her chest tightened with a flutter of emotion, a mixture of surprise, warmth, and anticipation, because in his careful, thoughtful gesture, she felt both recognition and intention, a message that said more than words could capture, and she spent the day moving through her routine with a lightness that felt almost unreal, the bouquet sitting on her kitchen counter, a symbol of something she had longed for but hadn't dared to hope for, reminding her of every small kindness, every shared laugh, every quiet moment that had slowly built this connection into something palpable. And as evening approached, her nerves danced with excitement and fear, a tangle of longing and caution, yet underneath it all was a deep sense of trust, of certainty that this was right, that the moments with him were precious because they were simple, genuine, and unforced. When she stepped outside, Ethan was waiting on the familiar corner, dressed casually but with that same warmth in his eyes that had drawn her in from the beginning, and the sight of him made her heart skip, made her breath catch in a way that reminded her of every subtle feeling that had been quietly growing between them, a tension of attraction, a longing, and a thrill that neither could fully name but both understood in the unspoken language of presence and attention. And when he smiled at her, shy yet hopeful, Lena felt the fragile pulse of possibility surge through her, the kind of feeling that turned ordinary moments into memories and left her quietly trembling with anticipation. They began to walk through the park, the evening air crisp and fragrant with flowers and earth, the streets slowly emptying of people, leaving them with the soft hush of night, the distant hum of city life, and the gentle sound of their footsteps on wet pavement. And as they moved together, the conversation flowed naturally at first, about small things, the fading light, the coolness of the evening, plans for the weekend, but gradually, as it always did, it deepened, turning to memories of childhood, dreams for the future, moments of insecurity, and hopes that had long been hidden. And Lena felt a strange, liberating sense of intimacy, a connection that transcended words, a closeness that was rooted in trust, understanding, and the slow recognition of hearts meeting. they paused near the fountain in the center of the park, where the water glimmered in the glow of the lamps, and for a moment neither spoke, simply taking in the quiet beauty around them, the reflection of light in the water, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of the city, and in that silence, Lena felt the weight of everything they had shared, everything that had built from that first rainy afternoon, and she realized that the connection they had formed was delicate yet profound, ordinary yet extraordinary, a slow bloom of understanding, affection, and the beginnings of love, and she wondered how something so gentle could feel so powerful, so transformative, making her heart ache in the best possible way. Ethan broke the silence with a soft laugh, commenting on a leaf that had floated into the fountain, and Lena laughed too, the sound ringing in the night, freeing, light, and as they continued their walk, they shared stories, confessions, and small secrets, their voices blending with the rhythm of the evening, their proximity a constant, comforting presence, and Lena felt the quiet thrill of being truly seen, understood, valued, and cared for, a sensation that had grown stronger with each gesture, each note, each smile, until now it wrapped around her like a protective warmth, soft yet undeniable. As the night deepened, they reached a small wooden bridge, the gentle water flowing beneath it reflecting the starlight above, and they leaned slightly on the railing, shoulders almost touching, sharing a comfortable silence that spoke volumes, and Lena realized that these quiet moments, this shared simplicity, had become more meaningful than grand declarations, more lasting than dramatic gestures, because it was real, it was honest, and it was theirs. Ethan's hand brushed lightly against hers, unintentional yet deliberate, and Lena felt a spark, a recognition that she returned it, fingers intertwining briefly, a touch that was electric and gentle at the same time, grounding them in the moment, affirming that the connection was mutual, and she felt a surge of courage to let herself feel fully, to embrace the emotions she had kept guarded for so long. And when he spoke again, his voice low and steady, he said that he had never expected that a simple gesture, helping with groceries or leaving a small note, could grow into something so meaningful, and Lena nodded, her own voice soft but certain, telling him that she felt the same, that the quiet accumulation of care, attention, and presence had changed her life in ways she hadn't dared to imagine, and that she was grateful for every single moment that had brought them here. The rain had stopped earlier, leaving a fresh, clean scent in the air, and as they walked back slowly toward the apartment building, Lena realized how much she had come to treasure these evenings, the way ordinary streets, fountains, benches, and bridges had become stages for their story, and she marveled at the simplicity that made it all extraordinary, the way genuine kindness and consistent presence had created a foundation for trust, intimacy, and the beginnings of love. And as they reached her building, Ethan paused, looking into her eyes with a tenderness that took her breath away, and said that whatever came next, he hoped they could continue this, continue discovering each other, continue building something slow and real. And Lena, feeling a mixture of relief, happiness, and anticipation, promised herself silently that she wanted the same, that she was ready to let this unfold naturally, without fear, without rush, simply embracing the connection that had grown stronger with every gesture, every conversation, every shared laugh. She watched him walk away, and even as he disappeared down the street, she felt his presence lingering, a gentle warmth inside her, a pulse of hope and longing, and she realized that the ordinary life she had once clung to so tightly had been transformed, not by dramatic events, but by the cumulative power of small, thoughtful gestures, by attentiveness, kindness, and the steady unfolding of emotional intimacy, and she understood that this was the kind of story that stayed with a person, quietly but powerfully, shaping their days and nights, coloring their memories, inspiring a tenderness and joy that could not be replicated by anything superficial or forced. Inside her apartment, she placed the bouquet carefully in a vase, letting the simple flowers symbolize everything that had happened and everything that might yet happen, feeling a deep, calming sense of contentment, a feeling that life could indeed hold beauty, connection, and love, and that the world, despite its unpredictability, had a way of gifting moments that could leave permanent marks on the heart. And as Lena sat by the window, looking out at the quiet streets, the lights reflecting softly on the wet pavement, she felt a gentle certainty, a quiet courage, and a longing that was not desperate but hopeful, because she knew that whatever came next with Ethan, they had begun something unforgettable, a journey built on kindness, attention, and shared moments. And in that understanding, she closed her eyes with a smile, ready for the next step, ready to embrace the slow, beautiful unfolding of love that had started with a single, simple gesture, and knowing that this night, these moments, and the connection they had nurtured would remain etched in her memory forever, shaping her heart, her expectations, and her capacity to believe in the extraordinary within the ordinary.